Hey guys, I'm Nick and welcome back to the channel. Well, another great episode of Star Trek Picard again this week, and today we're going to be talking through all the bits and pieces of what went down in this week's episode 4, entitled No Win Scenario. This show is just going from strength to strength. There hasn't been a bad episode or a bad moment this season so far. It's really, really growing with all cast members, new and old. It's got so much heart, and there is no doubt that Star Trek of old has returned. It's awesome. I did a live stream during the week with the guys at the Popcast, and we were lucky enough to have Terry Metalis drop by and chat to us all. And there were people in the chat that were naysayers who have hated Star Trek for the last couple of seasons and years and everything. And there were some people like myself who are trying to be a bit more positive about things. And I got to say, everyone was united in their point of view about this season of Star Trek Picard, and that it is smashing it out of the park. So everyone was really, really positive, and we got to ask Terry a few questions. I'll put the link in the description if anybody's interested in catching up on it. It's a really good watch. Okay, let's get into this week's review of Episode 4, Star Trek Picard Season 3, No Win Scenario. The episode starts off in a 5-year-old flashback where Picard is in Guinan's bar having his lunch. We get an opening shot of a little model of the Enterprise C there, and a bunch of cadets come and start hassling him while he's trying to eat his lunch, asking him about all of his sort of glorious moments in history, and he's talking about the Hirogen, how he was attacked. They somehow got from the Delta Quadrant to the Alpha Quadrant, and there was some sort of plot on his life that was thwarted by Worf and everything. So that was kind of cool. A little bit of history there. I'm assuming that happened sometime after Voyager got back from the Delta Quadrant, while Picard was still captain of the Enterprise E. But again, nice to have these little glimpses of extra Star Trek history we haven't been privy to over the time gap that is that void between Nemesis and Picard Season 1. It's pretty clear from Riker's correspondence with all of our other bridge crew that the Titan is in pretty bad shape. It's pretty badly crippled. They can't get out of the nebula. They're stuck, and it's essentially they're in a Kobayashi Maru style predicament here, a no-win scenario. It seems like they've only got a few hours of life support and everything left, and they're struggling to come up with ways to get out of their predicament. Good to see we're getting a little bit more time with our bridge crew too. I always like it when we get to know a bit of our bridge crew a bit better. Which is good. We get a little bit of interaction with some of our crew members here, which is great. And from a scene we get with Riker and Picard, it's clear that Riker's family situation, having kids, enduring the loss of his son Thad, has really affected him emotionally, and it has also affected his decision-making process as the captain of a starship. He's become probably a little bit less gung-ho, a little bit less risk-taker, become more conscious of the fact that the lives of his fellow crewmates that he's responsible for. Guys, if you haven't subscribed to Sci-Finatics yet, please don't be shy to do so. Click on that big subscribe button to stay current and up to date with all the latest Star Trek news on YouTube. Meanwhile, Seven's on the hunt for our changeling infiltrator. She's scouring quarters. We're looking through the quarters of the crewman, who was clearly replaced by a changeling. He's got Calto and a few other things there in his quarters. Obviously, he likes a game of that in his spare time. And we find out that he was replaced by a changeling somewhere before Beverly and Jack Crusher came on board. So the changeling has been on the ship for quite some time. We get a nice scene with Seven and Riker, just about how she's going to track down the changeling. He's keeping things very under wraps in terms of how it's all handled. And it's also good to see that Shaw hasn't been 100% sidelined despite his injuries and everything that he took on the bridge in last week's episode. I think he's now recuperating. He's still not quite up to taking back the captain's chair yet, but he's still there for some good advice. And even though, let's face it, Shaw's a bit of a dick, he's still got some good advice to offer Seven, talking about changelings and what he knows about them. His general knowledge about changelings is much better than Seven's, because she was off in the Delta Quadrant with Janeway and crew on Voyager at the time, so she wasn't kind of privy to all that Dominion War business. So it's good that Shaw can still offer, a few tips here and there. We get Beverly and Jack obviously in sickbay, meeting up with Jean-Luc. Jean-Luc realises they might not be too much time left to get to know his son, because the predicament that the Titan's in's pretty bad. He obviously organises a little bit of a father and son get-together on the holodeck, courtesy of the 10 Forward program, using Guinan's bar from Los Angeles. And they get to have a bit of a heart-to-heart, talk about all things, including the follically challenged nature of Jean-Luc and whether Jack would expect to go down a similar road or not. I think Jack, you're in luck, because I'm pretty sure that baldness is inherited from the mother's side of the family. So I think you're probably okay. Meanwhile, Riker's kind of struggling. He's trying to leave a kind of a farewell message to Troy, but he's really struggling. He's got to pause the recording. He can't quite find the words to express himself. He's obviously going through a lot. Meanwhile, I love that Shaw kind of came up with the thought that, okay, well, if there's a changeling on board, he's got to regenerate at some point. He's going to need a receptacle to do it in. And they brought up the little pad, and it showed Odo's face and everything, a picture of a changeling regeneration bucket. So that was really cool that we got a little kind of glimpse of Odo there. In this episode as a reference to the bucket that Odo used to regenerate in. So that was kind of sweet. So thanks to Shaw, Seven's on the mission to sniff around and find the changeling's regeneration bucket, which she does, and it's pretty much very similar to Odo's bucket. I think changelings like to regenerate in these special buckets. It's not just any old thing. Here's a cardboard box to kind of morph into. You gotta have the special bucket. So obviously this is a common thing amongst changelings. And also in this episode we get to find out that Vadic is in fact also a changeling. She cuts her hand off, which then morphs into another changeling, and she's somehow able to communicate with other changelings, whether it's from the Great Link or somewhere else, I'm not quite sure. But by cutting off a part of herself, this part of herself was able to take its own form to be able to somehow communicate with the other changelings as part of this particular faction, that the pursuit and recovery of Jack Crusher is a critical imperative, because it would seem that the strike wasn't able to go deeper into the anomaly where the Titan was because of the gravity well and everything, and they were kind of waiting for them to come out so they could capture them. But the other changeling basically said, you got to drop your portal weapon. This is, weighing you down. Then you can go in. So that at least gets that off the table as a potential threat, which I guess will be a good thing for the Titan going forward. We get another 5-year-old flashback with Picard and the cadets in Guinan's bar. This time he's talking about the Temerian incident with Darmok and Gelada Tanagra or whatever from that episode entitled Darmok, which was cool to have an anecdote we're familiar with, so that was nice. Back on the holodeck, obviously Jack and Jean-Luc are sort of trying to find a connection there. Jack's kind of saying he doesn't need a connection, and Jean-Luc's saying, well, you might not need a connection, but I kind of do. He's just been sprung on this, the news of him having a son. Obviously, Jack's been aware of it for some time and has chosen not to reach out to have Jean-Luc as part of his life, but Jean-Luc kind of needs to fill in some of that lost time, I guess. He's only just been made aware of it, and it's probably affecting him emotionally more than it is Jack. Seven finds the changeling in the hallway. He attacks. First instinct is to destroy his regeneration bucket so that Seven can't take a scan of that and then therefore track him down. But he manages to escape into the conduits or the Jeffries tubes or whatever on the ship. I got to say, the changelings look really good this season. In fact, better than they probably ever have before. I think on DS9 they looked very CG, very glossy and very computer generated, whereas I almost can't tell now with the changeling effects whether they've done some of it practically, actually using physical slime that they've baked up, in a kitchen somewhere, or whether it is in fact a CG effect. It's pretty well done. I like the moment in the bar between Jean-Luc and Jack Crusher where Jack kind of acknowledges the fact that he's named after his mum's ex-husband, and that the fact that that's sort of a little bit on the nose or something. I think he makes this face as he's sort of reciting the story, which kind of implies, he's not maybe 100% cool with the fact that, Mum named him after her first husband, even though it was in honour. So it was sort of, I thought that was a sort of a cute moment that he sort of acknowledges this sort of, it's a little bit weird maybe. And then obviously we get Jean-Luc reciting an anecdote with him and Jack Crusher back in the Stargazer days when him and Jack were obviously off to some colony to chase a couple of girls. and they got into some trouble with some micrometeorites and everything, and had to, you know, limp their way back to the starship, you know, with no power and no visuals and everything. And, you know, that was a pretty hairy situation. But obviously, you know, out of all these situations come, you know, the glimmer of hope, and how, you know, situations, even though how hopeless they can seem, sometimes there is a light at the end of the tunnel. We then get Shaw coming in, and he's clearly got a little bit of bitterness towards Jean-Luc. He's kind of a bit similar to how Sisko was. If we remember how Sisko was towards Picard in that first episode of DS9, because his wife had been killed at the Battle of Wolf 359 whilst Picard was Locutus. And there was, you know, some baggage and some animosity towards Picard from Sisko's point of view. Shaw kind of is suffering from the same kind of PTSD, where he was on board another starship. He was sort of a junior engineer at the time, and he was only one of 10 who was able to escape in an escape pod to get out of the battle before the ship was destroyed at the battle under the hands of Locutus. So it's clear that Shaw's also got some animosity and everything towards Picard. In the context of these anecdotes that Picard's talking to Jack Crusher and also to Shaw about, there's obviously a moment there where Picard drops the F-bomb. And I gotta say, it really pulls me out of Star Trek when characters who you kind of think shouldn't be dropping the F-bomb do. I think I'm completely cool if, you know, if Shaw drops the F-bomb, even if sort of Seven drops the F-bomb, I think it's more in character. But when you kind of hear Picard in this episode dropping the F-bomb, calling Shaw a dipshit, it seems really out of character to me. It's something we've never heard Picard really do to any great extent before, and it's the one and only part of this episode I didn't really like. I'm not a prude. I'll drop the F-bomb myself. I'm no saint when it comes to occasionally using a bit of a potty mouth. But in these characters which we've known for so long, and they behave in a certain way, suddenly to have Picard dropping F-bombs and calling people dipshits doesn't seem in character to Picard for me. I think that was out of place, and I think that could have been rephrased a little bit better to be in a bit more in character to what we would expect coming out of the mouth of Jean-Luc Picard. I did like the moment where Shaw apologised to the other crew members and said, sort of, sorry, you know, at some point, I replaced charm with being an asshole or something to that effect. So that was kind of, I guess, quite self-aware of Shaw, that he was able to kind of see that, you know, he can be a bit of a jerk. I think it was great that Beverly came up with that awareness that she was timing these waves like they were contractions and they were getting closer together, and became aware that, oh, there's something going on here that sort of resembles a pregnancy, to do with the life that was at the heart of this nebula. And they obviously work out that they can use these pulses or waves where suddenly there's a massive power surge, to kind of use that to their advantage to ride the energy waves out of the nebula, which I love. These little moments like this are really the heart of Star Trek. You know, these are little, you know, get out of jail cards that we saw our crew coming up with back in Next Generation days. So there's so much in the recipe of Picard Season 3 that just takes me back to these same sort of problem-solving techniques and everything. That's really great. There's even a reference at one point to Farpoint, where Beverly's talking about the organic space-borne life forms and everything, and Picard's saying, oh yeah, like Farpoint Station, yeah. So really good that we all these little references and stuff that we can go, oh, yep, okay, that makes sense. You know, we're using terminology and references that we're familiar with. You know, really good writing. I love Riker's speech on the bridge where he gives the big sort of rousing pep talk to the crew. They're about to try the mission. It might not work, but they've got to all try. We've got to all band together. Those rousing speeches from the captain are really the heart of Star Trek. Comes out of these, you know, moments where you see all the crew listening, and you can see everyone's hearts swelling with pride and everything as the captain gives this inspiring speech right before they do something incredibly dangerous and have an incredibly high likelihood of everyone being killed, but we're going to try nonetheless, and that's what being in Starfleet's all about. I thought it was cool that obviously Shaw's little reference to him being an engineer back in the day, putting that skill set to use in the nacelle engine room on the Titan in order to open up the nacelle housings or whatever, so they can siphon in some of that energy wave that is going to hit the ship and help them get out of the nebula. And we've got Seven helping him out there. Great, we haven't sidelined Shaw completely. We're still giving him a job to do, which is awesome. And the fact that he can work with Seven and everything and achieve their mission here, I think as we go, Shaw will warm to Seven even more. It's cool we get Picard taking the con on the flight out of there. Riker sort of lets him sit in the center seat for their expedition out of there. So I'm glad that these guys are kind of sharing a little bit of captain duties at this particular point. I think that was nice to get a little bit of, Riker got to do the rousing speech, but Picard got to take the con and do the whole engage thing to get them out of there. So that was a nice balance of utilising the two most experienced captains in Starfleet in this capacity. We get Sydney LaForge, aka Changeling, coming in to try to upset Shaw and Seven, but obviously Seven is able to identify her pretty quickly because Sydney LaForge always calls her Commander Seven, not Commander Hansen. We get to play a bit of a game of asteroids as our ship has to duck and weave through the asteroid field, getting out of the anomaly, where Picard's giving navigational instructions to LaForge on the helm to get them safely through the nebula. All these little moments in this episode, it's just classic Star Trek and classic kind of those TNG moments, that like all of these little ingredients. It's Star Trek like we used to know Star Trek. And it's like, it just feels so familiar now. I love the fact that Riker got to give the Shrike a bit of payback at the end of this episode, where obviously the Shrike threw the Ilios at the Titan earlier in the season, and obviously now as a bit of payback, Riker's decided to do the same thing with an asteroid, which he hurls at the Shrike, which obviously disables them, enabling the Titan to get away to warp without incident, which was a nice little payback moment there. And at the end of the episode, we get all of the pregnancy, contractions, and everything that was going on with the center of the nebula. Obviously resulted in the birth of a whole lot of little sort of wispy kind of almost Avatar tree wispy kind of creatures, only much bigger, born into space. Which I think was great. These are glimpses and harkbacks to episodes like Encounter at Farpoint with the birth of the two big creatures there at the end there, and it's all these little moments, that sense of wonderment, that sense of grandeur and heart and soul and everything. It's all so great stuff that just solidify my point of view that Star Trek as it should be, is alive and well and absolutely thriving in the form of Star Trek Picard Season 3. And I love the fact that we get Beverly sort of saying, oh, well, we're here to seek out new life and everything, and and then Riker says, yeah, time to boldly get the hell out of here, kind of thing. So that was a few little quirky, fun moments as well between, our legacy cast. We got to find out at the end with another one of our Guinan's Bar flashbacks that this moment where all of our Starfleet, junior officers were probing Picard for information while he was trying to eat his lunch at Guinan's Bar. Jack Crusher was, in fact, amongst them. He was in the background at the bar, and he was listening in, and he was trying to kind of, see if there was a moment there he might be able to kind of get into the conversation, but Picard sort of shut him out by sort of saying, Starfleet's the only family I need, and everything. So maybe if he had have said something differently, Jack might have made an effort to connect with him back then. Awesome, we got to see that communication at the end between Riker and Troy. Obviously, Riker's a bit of apologetic. Troy's very forgiving and everything, and it looks like he's not in the doghouse anymore. He's coming back to her, and obviously she's going to be happy to see him. So that's really good to see, that happening again. And then at the end of this episode, we get to see more of these visions from Jack. We got a glimpse of them in the last week's episode with those tree branches growing out the bulkhead and everything behind Seven's head. We got more of them in this episode with Jack looking into the mirror. We get more flashes of red clouds and red doors and areas that look like it's some sort of post-apocalyptic destruction, or there's something going on with Jack biologically that, obviously the changelings are very eager to get their hands on, and hopefully we're going to get a bit more insight into this in our next episode. All in all, love this episode. Season is going from strength to strength. So many, heartfelt moments in this episode that were just, really nice harkbacks to that same sort of, tone and storytelling style, that we had back in TNG. Are just really working so well for Picard season 3. So my hat's off to Terry Matalas. What a great ride he's taking us on this season. And I'm loving every minute of it. Guys, let me know your thoughts. Leave a drop a thought in the comments section, and let me know what your perspective was on this episode. Guys, I've also got a sale at the moment in the merch store for another few days. 20% off all my merch in the merch store. So be sure to check out that over there. Pick yourself up a massive bargain, and it helps support the channel at the same time. I'm gonna be back very soon with my next video. I'll catch you guys soon.